Sarah's breath came in ragged gasps as she stumbled up the steep hillside, her lungs burning with each step. The low-hanging branches of the trees clawed at her face and arms, leaving angry red scratches on her pale skin. She had no idea how long she'd been running, but the panic that gripped her showed no signs of subsiding. Behind her, the bestial howl that had chased her through the forest seemed to have fallen silent. But she dared not slow down. Not yet. As she finally reached the crest of the hill, Sarah allowed herself a brief moment of respite, leaning against the rough trunk of an ancient oak. Her heart was pounding so hard she felt it might burst from her chest at any moment. She closed her eyes for a second, trying to calm her erratic breathing. How had it come to this? Just a few hours ago, she had been savoring the excitement of her first day as a ranger at Blackwood National Park. At 25, fresh out of college with a degree in conservation biology, she had finally landed her dream job, protecting nature, observing wildlife, guiding hikers. It was everything she had ever wanted to do. Blackwood Park was renowned for its wild beauty and mysterious legends. Stories of unexplained disappearances and strange creatures circulated among the inhabitants of nearby villages, but Sarah had never paid them much attention. To her, they were just tales designed to attract thrill-seeking tourists. Her first day had started off mundane enough. She had toured the main trails, checked information boards and markers. Then, in the early afternoon, she had decided to explore a more remote area of the park, a part she wasn't yet familiar with. That's when everything had gone sideways. Sarah opened her eyes, scanning her surroundings. The forest was quiet. Too quiet. Not a bird song, not a rustle of leaves. Just an oppressive silence, as if nature itself was holding its breath. She had to keep moving. Find civilization. Warn someone. But in which direction? The panic and frenzied run had completely disoriented her. The sun was starting to set, casting eerie shadows between the trees. Suddenly, a twig snapped behind her. Sarah froze, every sense on high alert. The sound repeated, closer this time. Something was approaching. Without thinking, she started running again, careening down the other side of the hill. Branches whipped at her face, but she didn't slow down. Fear gave her wings, fueling each desperate step. As she reached the bottom of the slope, her foot caught on a hidden root. Sarah went sprawling, the impact knocking the wind out of her. A sharp pain shot through her ankle. Trying to get up, she immediately collapsed again with a whimper. Her ankle was likely sprained, if not worse. Tears welling in her eyes, Sarah crawled to a nearby boulder, propping herself against it. She was trapped, unable to flee. The footsteps were drawing inexorably closer. Closing her eyes, Sarah saw in a flash what had led her to this nightmarish situation. A few hours earlier, she had been exploring a remote area of the park when she stumbled upon an old log cabin. The place wasn't marked on any official maps, which had piqued her curiosity. The structure looked ancient, half swallowed by vegetation. Driven by her explorer's instinct, Sarah had approached. The rickety door had creaked open ominously. The interior was shrouded in darkness, but she could make out strange shapes hanging on the walls. Pulling the flashlight from her backpack, Sarah had taken a step inside. What she discovered chilled her to the bone. The walls were covered with dried animal skins, some so old they were falling to pieces. But that wasn't the most terrifying part. Amidst these macabre trophies were bones that could only belong to human beings. Grinning skulls stared at her from empty eye sockets. Sarah had backed away, horrified, her back hitting something solid. Spinning around, she found herself face to face with a creature straight out of a nightmare. Standing at least 7 feet tall, the thing had a vaguely humanoid silhouette, but covered in shaggy fur. Its face was a grotesque blend of human and animal features, with glowing yellow eyes full of malevolence. Long, razor-sharp claws adorned its oversized hands. Sarah had screamed, bolting out of the cabin. The creature had let out a blood-curdling roar, giving chase. And now, here she was, backed up against this boulder, waiting for death to find her. The footsteps drew closer still. Sarah could hear a ragged, bestial breathing. She opened her eyes, ready to face her fate. But what she saw surprised her. It wasn't the monstrous creature standing before her, but an old man. Tall and lean, he wore worn, patched clothes. His weathered face was framed by a scraggly gray beard, and his faded blue eyes regarded her with curiosity. "Well, little lady," he said in a gravelly voice, "looks like you've gone and got yourself lost." Sarah gaped for a moment, unable to comprehend what was happening. Was this a trap? A hallucination? I I saw something," she finally stammered. "A creature. In an old cabin." The old man's brow furrowed, his face darkening. "Ah," he said simply, "you've met the guardian." "The guardian?" Sarah repeated, confused. The man crouched down beside her, wincing slightly as if his old bones protested the movement. "It's a long story, little one, but first we need to tend to that ankle." With expert hands, he examined Sarah's injury. "Not broken," he diagnosed. "Just a nasty sprain. You're lucky." He pulled a worn but clean handkerchief from his pocket and began to bandage Sarah's ankle. His calloused hands were surprisingly gentle in their movements. "Name's Eustace," he said as he worked. "I live not far from here. If you'd like, I can take you to my place. It'll be safer than staying in the woods at night." Sarah hesitated. Trusting a stranger in these circumstances seemed risky, but did she really have a choice? "Okay," she finally agreed. "I'm Sarah. I was the new park ranger." A flash of understanding crossed Eustace's eyes. "Ah, I see. That explains a few things. Come on, lean on me. We'll take it slow." With the old man's help, Sarah got to her feet. The pain in her ankle was sharp but bearable. Slowly, they began to make their way through the darkening forest. "You mentioned a guardian," Sarah said after a few minutes of silent walking. "What exactly is it?" Eustace sighed deeply. "It's a story that goes way back, little one. A story many have forgotten or prefer to ignore." He paused as if gathering his thoughts. "It all started nearly 200 years ago. Back then, this region was nothing but vast wilderness. The first settlers were just starting to arrive, clearing land to build their farms. Among these pioneers was a man named Jeremiah Blackwood. He was a solitary trapper, known for his knowledge of the forest and his hunting skills. But Jeremiah wasn't like the others. He had a deep respect for nature and its creatures. He only took what he needed to survive, never more." Eustace stopped for a moment, allowing Sarah to catch her breath. The young woman listened intently, fascinated despite her fear. "One day," the old man continued, "Jeremiah came across a group of hunters who were slaughtering animals for sport. Furious, he confronted them, but the men just laughed at him, calling him a fool. That night, as Jeremiah prayed to the forest spirits to forgive the hunters' actions, something strange happened. A thick mist enveloped his cabin, and a mysterious voice spoke to him. The voice told him he had been chosen to become the protector of the forest, that he would receive the power to punish those who did not respect the natural balance. But this power came at a price. Jeremiah would have to give up his humanity, becoming a creature of the forest himself." Sarah shivered, beginning to understand where this story was leading. "Jeremiah accepted," Eustace went on. "The next morning the hunters were found, or what was left of them, torn apart by what appeared to be a wild beast of incredible strength. Since that day, the guardian, as he came to be called, has watched over the forest. He protects the animals and punishes those who abuse nature. Over the decades, his appearance has become more and more bestial, reflecting his wild nature. They came within sight of a small wooden house, nestled in a clearing. Smoke rose from the chimney, promising warmth and safety. But then," Sarah said as they approached the house, "why did he attack me? I didn't do anything wrong." Eustace opened the door, helping Sarah inside. The interior was simple but comfortable, filled with old furniture and objects that seemed to have a history. "The guardian didn't attack you, little one," Eustace said, settling Sarah into an armchair near the fireplace. "He was testing you." "Testing me?" Sarah repeated incredulously. "Yes. You see, the guardian is getting old. Even with his powers, he can't live forever. He's been looking for a successor for years." Sarah felt a shiver run down her spine. "You mean—" "Yes," Eustace confirmed. He's chosen you to take his place." A heavy silence fell over the room. Sarah stared into the flames in the fireplace, trying to process what she had just heard. It was absurd, impossible, and yet, after what she had seen today, "I don't understand," she finally said. "Why me?" Eustace sat down across from her, his old bones creaking slightly. "The guardian chooses someone who already has a deep connection with nature, someone who respects it and wants to protect it. Isn't that why you became a park ranger?" Sarah could only nod. It was true. Her love for nature had always guided her life choices. "But I can't," she began. "You don't have to accept," Eustace gently interrupted. "The choice is yours. But know that if you refuse, the guardian will continue to search, and perhaps the next chosen one won't have your heart or your integrity." Sarah fell silent, lost in thought. The idea of becoming a half-man, half-beast creature terrified her. But the thought of leaving the forest unprotected, at the mercy of those who didn't respect nature, seemed just as unbearable. "What would happen if I accepted?" she asked in a barely audible voice. Eustace looked at her with compassion. "You would receive the guardian's powers, strength, longevity, the ability to communicate with animals and plants. But you would also lose a part of your humanity. You could no longer live among men." He paused before adding, "It's not a decision to be taken lightly. Rest tonight. Tomorrow, if you wish, I'll take you to the guardian's cabin. There you can talk to him and make your decision." Sarah nodded, grateful for this reprieve. The fatigue and emotions of the day were starting to catch up with her. Eustace prepared a makeshift bed for her near the fireplace and gave her an herbal tea to ease the pain in her ankle. Soon, Sarah drifted into a restless sleep, filled with strange dreams where she ran through the forest, feeling her body transform, becoming stronger, wilder. The next morning, she was awakened by the smell of coffee and toast. Eustace was bustling about in his small kitchen, softly humming an old tune. Sarah sat up, surprised to find that the pain in her ankle had significantly decreased. "Sleep well, little one?" Eustace asked, handing her a steaming cup of coffee. Sarah nodded gratefully. "Better than I would have thought, given the circumstances." They ate breakfast in silence, Sarah lost in her thoughts. The morning light filtering through the windows gave the situation an almost unreal aspect. Had it really happened? Was she really considering becoming a mythical guardian creature of the forest? "Have you made your decision?" Eustace finally asked, interrupting her reflections. Sarah took a deep breath. I think I need to at least talk to the guardian, understand exactly what this entails." Eustace nodded gravely. "A wise decision. We'll leave as soon as you're ready." An hour later, they were making their way deep into the forest. Sarah walked cautiously, her ankles still tender but able to bear her weight. The morning sun pierced through the canopy, creating a play of shadows and light on the forest floor. As they advanced, Sarah noticed that the forest seemed different from the day before. More alive, more vibrant. She could hear birdsong, the rustling of small animals in the underbrush. It was as if nature itself was holding its breath, waiting for her decision. After what felt like hours of walking, they came within sight of the old cabin. Sarah felt her heart rate quicken, memories of the previous day flooding back. Eustace stopped at the edge of the clearing. "I can't go any further," he said softly. "This is your path now, little one. Whatever you decide, know that you've shown great courage in coming this far." Sarah thanked him with a nod, too moved to speak. Then, gathering all her courage, she stepped towards the cabin. The door opened before she even had a chance to knock. The creature, the guardian, stood there, imposing and terrifying. Yet this time, Sarah didn't feel the same panic as the day before. In the guardian's yellow eyes, she saw intelligence, ancient wisdom. "Come in, young Sarah," the guardian said in a deep, raspy voice like distant thunder. "We have much to discuss." Sarah entered the cabin, her heart pounding. The interior was as she remembered it, filled with animal skins and bones. But in the daylight she noticed other details: dried herbs hanging from the ceiling, crystals arranged on shelves, ancient books piled in a corner. The guardian sat heavily in a chair that groaned under his weight. He gestured for Sarah to take a seat across from him. "You have questions," he said. It wasn't a question, but a statement. Sarah nodded. "Many. Why me? What exactly does it mean to become the guardian? And why do you need a successor now?" The guardian fixed her with his penetrating gaze. "I chose you, Sarah, because I saw in you a true love for nature. Not just a superficial or romantic interest, but a deep understanding of the delicate balance that governs all life." He paused as if gathering his thoughts. "Becoming the guardian means abandoning a part of your humanity to fully embrace your connection with nature. You will gain strength, longevity, understanding of the natural world. But you will also lose much. Your life among humans, your relationships, all of this will have to be left behind." Sarah shivered at these words. The idea of abandoning everything was terrifying. "As for why now," the guardian continued, "it's simple. I am old, Sarah, older than you can imagine. I have seen this forest grow, change, be threatened, and then protected. But my strength is waning. Soon, I will no longer be able to fulfill my role." He leaned forward, his eyes glowing with an intense light. "And the forest needs a protector.